Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
This is your host, Alicia Debrell from Insight Media. Today's guest is Shannon Wilkinson. Shannon is now a #1 international bestselling author for her new book, Ripping Off the Hoodie, encouraging the next generation of STEM girls, STEM on that one. She is an avid entrepreneur that has been in the technology space for more than a minute, but let's hear it from the professional. So I want to welcome to the show, Shannon Wilkinson. Hi, Shannon. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Alicia. Thanks for having me.
No, this is going to be great. I'm excited. I have never done an interview based on math and technology and economics. I love the subject. So, can you tell us a little bit about your background and why you decided to write the book?
Right. So first, before I get into that, I just want to tell everybody that STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. I know we throw a lot of acronyms out there, and people that aren't in the space might not know what that means. So
For sure.
just before we get into it, but I've been in technology for my whole career. I started as a software developer for the United Nations, and then I moved up the ranks to go into software development team management. And then finally, I've landed in executive leadership, driving the vision and design of cybersecurity products, particularly threat intelligence. And I'm currently the CEO of Tego Cyber Inc., which is a cybersecurity threat intelligence company that I co-founded.
And this
Honestly,
that's not the first company you've owned. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So my husband and I also co-founded another company in 2015 that we exited to private equity.
Nice. Sorry, go ahead. I was just digging in a little bit.
Yeah, no worries. But honestly, if you would have asked me about having a career in technology when I was growing up and going through high school, I probably would have told you that you were crazy, because I really didn't think that I was going to have a career in technology, because when I was growing up, I struggled with math. I mean, I'm one of those people that has difficulty with the multiplication table because I have the habit of transposing numbers. So when I switch them around, I always end up with the wrong answer. So I didn't even consider a career in technology when I was starting my university education. I started in criminal justice, but I found out that I didn't really like that track. And I call it my aha moment, but really it was when I was sitting at my job in the computer lab at UNLV, I realized that I'd always had an affinity for technology and loved working on computers. So that day, I actually decided to explore technology and IT as an educational path and career path, and I ended up getting a master's and a bachelor's in information technology management.
I love that. I love the aha moment. I love the story behind it, because that definitely matters. But why did you want to write the book?
So I have to give a lot of credit to my husband, Troy, for the actual idea of sitting down and writing the book. So for several years now, I've been speaking at conferences and events about being a woman in technology, or more recently about being a woman in a male-dominated industry. Mm-hmm. And we were at a conference last year in November, and he just looked at me after I did my session about being a woman in a male-dominated industry. And he's like, "You have so much passion and so many good stories, and you speak at these conferences. Why don't you put them down on paper and share it with more people?" So in December and pretty much through the first part of the COVID quarantine, I sat down and started pulling all these stories and thoughts out of my head. And I reached out to my network of women in technology, and very fortunately, a lot of them shared their stories with me about experiences that they had, or on certain topics that I wanted to write in my book. So it was a great experience, and took me a bit longer than I expected it would, because I'm like, I've got all these great ideas, but actually putting them down on paper and writing them out and everything was a bit of a process. But I'm thankful for being able to share my story.
No, I love that. I absolutely love that. I love the story. I love the background, and I love the husband support. I think that's great. And and not only that, but just the women around you who are also in the industry, who are other women who are dealing with the same things that you are, and women going forward. I think that that's awesome. So I do have one question for you. Well, I have many, but here's one. So how does it feel to become a #1 international bestselling author with your book called Ripping Off the Hoodie? How does that feel?
It feels amazing. I'm really humbled by the positive response that I got to the book. Like I said, getting to share my story and message was really the reason why I wanted to write the book, and I definitely achieved that goal. And I just like to say to everybody, thank you for everybody that supported me in the journey, and then also went out to purchase a copy of the book on Kindle or paperback. It's just, the response has been amazing, and it really has humbled me.
Well, I like that too. But okay, so I do have a question, but I wanna rephrase it a little bit. So
Sure.
your goal behind writing the book was to share your stories, but is there any other goals behind that? And if somebody was going to read the book, what would you want that? I mean, whether it be like a teenager or a child, I mean, I don't know. I would assume like above like 8, but or a teacher or another woman in the industry, if they were going to read it, what would you want them to take away from what they're getting out of the content from the book?
Right. So besides sharing my story and the stories of other women in the industry, I think one of the goals in writing the book is bringing awareness to, I guess, what would be the negative impact of not having more women involved in STEM, and what that means for the future. Because it's not only just because the skills gap is growing and there's millions of vacant positions within STEM that go unfilled because there's just a lack of the right people with the right skills, but it also results in a lack of people available to innovate. There's no denying that men and women have different thought processes, and that difference means that there is a difference in our problem-solving skills. And as a result, there's a lot more imagination within the innovation process. So really, it's, not having more women involved in STEM means that there's a lack of innovation within STEM. So, that's another goal behind writing the book, is just bring awareness to what it means for the future. If there's a single message that I want people to take away from the book, I think it would be that we have to lift up young girls to know that careers in STEM is something that they can achieve, and that the opportunity is out there. And we also have to try to encourage them from a young age, because as we find out, we kind of get the idea of what we're going to do in our future careers as we grow up. So through middle school and through high school, we start kind of planning our path for what comes next after we get out of our first 12 years of education. And so making girls in that age range aware of what's out there and that this is a possibility for them, and encouraging them and continuing to support their educational path within STEM is important, that we don't kind of let them fall off through those middle school and high school years, because we do see that happening.
No, and I like the way you brought up that men and women, we all have different, both men and women both have different, the way they solve problems. And you're right, women being stronger in the STEM industry will bring different solutions and different conclusions to problems. And I think that that's awesome. So I do want to bring it back to something that you mentioned in your book about, harassment and bullying, and having a big part of why some women don't get into the industry. And I want to ask first, did you run into that problem? And if you did, how did you solve it? And then how would you tell other women or kids or young women to deal with that type of situation going into this type of industry?
Right. So I fortunately have been very lucky in my career in education not to face any direct harassment or bullying of being a woman in the field. And that's one of the reasons why I reached out to my network of women, is because I know it happens. So I said, hey, has anybody ever experienced that? And I got a lot of stories from different women who have faced that, either from other men. But then also on the flip side, I was kind of surprised to find out that there were women bullying other women within the industry, either
Really?
because they kind of wanted to be like, I'm the only one in the room kind of thing, or, I don't know the reason why, but so I write about that, being a woman uplifting other women and supporting other women in career and education. Because I was kind of surprised to hear some of those stories about, women being mean to other women within their careers. But
Yeah.
it's definitely that whole, the stories that come out of kind of the bro culture within technology, particularly, that kind of scare young women and, women within their careers from pursuing STEM. I think we all look to pursue a life that would make us happy. And when we're made to feel unhappy and unwelcome, whether in our university classes or at our jobs where we spend most of our days, there's no doubt that we would question, like, if another degree or another job would make us happier. I'm a firm believer in the saying, find a job you love and you never have to work a day in our life. And if you're being bullied or harassed because you're a woman in your field, I think it's hard to find that kind of joy and happiness. And you start dreading going to work or class every single day. I did have the opportunity to share a story about one young lady that I was mentoring that had this situation happen to her in my book. And I titled the chapter basically, "It's Okay to Be a Girl," because she was kind of being harassed and bullied because she was the only girl in her office, and the guys kind of segregated her from everything because they were, she looked different, she acted different, they couldn't make their kind of locker room, jokes around her and
Commentary,
stuff
yeah.
like that. So, but
Mhm.
just saying, it's okay to be a girl. It's okay to dress like a woman and be attractive. And, just because you want to be in technology doesn't mean you have to look a certain way.
I love that. I love the outlook on it because if you think of women, like even me as a woman, and I'm an entrepreneur and I have my own business, but if I look at women in technology in my head, the stigmatism or the stigma is that they should look a certain way, or they should act a certain way. So I love the fact that you address that in your book. I think that that's awesome. It's probably one of the reasons why it became a bestseller. But I also want to talk to you about, so what do you think obviously the man aspect, but are there any other huge challenges that for women and children that are getting into the STEM industries besides just it being stigmatized as a male oriented business?
Right. So, touched on a little bit of just letting girls know that STEM careers are available to them. I talk a lot about it in the book, but my husband and I, we have three girls and they're very into technology. And there's been a lot of challenges of being the mother of three girls that like technology. They are incredibly into video games, and
Okay.
being able to find like t-shirts and clothing that's made for girls for the video games that they like has been a challenge. So they get really upset when they're like, I want a t-shirt from this video game, and I have to take them to the boys section because there's nothing available in the girls section for them. So a bit, you know, the whole stereotype or the whole push by society of, girls should still play with dolls and Barbies and be pretty princesses and that kind of thing, where we push boys to be astronauts and NASA and, adventurers and dinosaurs and that kind of thing. We start pushing girls away from technology and science at a very young age. So when we ask children what a scientist or astronaut looks like,
Hmm.
overwhelmingly they'll depict a male in that role.
Yeah.
And that's one
No,
of
for
the
sure.
reasons. Oh yeah, sorry.
No, for sure. No, I
um,
was just agreeing. Sorry.
yeah, no. So it's actually one of the reasons why I always look to participate in like girl and tech events and career days at local schools, is because I like to go show kids, especially girls, that, this being me is what a person in cybersecurity or technology looks like. And like, I like to dispel the idea of that, within cybersecurity, kind of that a person that's in cybersecurity is like some anonymous hooded person in a dark room. the stereotype that you see in the news. And if you read news articles, it's always like some person in a hoodie. And it's kind of a big reason for the title of my book, Ripping Off the Hoodie, is basically to show girls that a normal person, if I could call myself normal, a normal person like me is within cybersecurity, and they can be too.
No, and I love that. And I actually, and after I have a 6-year-old little girl, so I don't have 3, and I think your kids are a little bit older than mine, but I never even thought about the fact, because she's a tomboy and she loves all the boy things. And when she gets into video games, she's going to want those things, and they're not they're not out there for her to have. And so I completely understand the stigma about, where you're coming from on that. And I didn't realize that until you explained it. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that I'm kind of trying to change too, and like promote through social media, like, hey, if you're looking for STEM, gift ideas and stuff like that for the holidays, here are some things that you can get for your kids. And, it can be a challenge to find things for girls. I mean, there's no reason why we can't have a pink or purple lab coat for a scientist.
Exactly. Honestly, like I now I see what you're saying when you're explaining it to me. But I didn't, I wouldn't have thought about that before. And I hope the audience sees that too, because it is true. And girls should have the opportunity to do everything a boy can do. Just like the boys obviously have everything to do with what a girl can do. So I think it should be mutual. And I think that's awesome. I think that's very strong. And I love where your mindset is, and I love where your book goes. But so my next question might be a little repetitive, but because women are a minority in the STEM industries, right? So what does that mean to you? Does that mean just not having the opportunities, or does this mean not being able, or not, I guess, being convinced to go into the area? Where does it go with you?
So, for me, I've been asked to speak at a lot of conferences about being a woman in technology or a male-dominated industry. And I really hope that someday we can just get to the point where I won't just be considered as a woman in cybersecurity, but just rather a cybersecurity expert, regardless of what my gender is. I kind of doubt that'll happen in my lifetime, but maybe perhaps in that of my daughters. But just in bringing awareness to the gender gap in STEM, I'm definitely advocating that there's going to be this black and white 50-50 split between the genders. But because there's so many vacant positions and there's so many benefits to having more diversity, I think that we need to do all that we can to bring more awareness about the possibilities and for careers in education and what it means to have a career in STEM. And
no, I completely agree is what I was going to say.
Yeah, no. And then also, when we start talking about minorities, there's not just this big gap between genders within STEM, but when you start looking at the statistics of ethnic minorities in the space, the gap is even larger. So honestly, it is, yes. You'll find that Latinos and Asians and African Americans, involvement within STEM is like even smaller than, the percentage of the genders. So as an Asian American, I sometimes have to admit that I forget that I'm in this even like tinier percentage of a woman who's also ethnic minority within the cybersecurity industry. And really, the only way that I think that we'll start closing the gaps is to focus on our educational efforts in schools that have minority populations. And in my book, I do talk about the digital divide, which is a lack of access to technology due to like economics, geography, and the availability of technology. And that's really a major factor because it affects minority populations more. And look, basically, if children and young adults don't have access to technology, how can we expect that they would pursue an education or have a career in it? It certainly makes it a lot harder.
For sure. So I guess my next question is, what is the best advice you can give a female and or a minority in the industry that either they may be currently in it, maybe on whichever side, or just starting out in the STEM industries?
Yeah, so best piece of advice is that you have to believe in yourself and your abilities. I think we've all heard of this phrase imposter syndrome, which is the feeling that you don't really have the skills or for some reason you don't deserve to be where you are. I think it really boils down to being about self-confidence. You know that you've worked really hard, you've gotten the education, you passed the interviews, you earned the job that you're in, you did well enough to get to where you are now. And you have to own it. We have to be proud of ourselves and our abilities. And we also have to acknowledge that we will never have all the answers. I mean, I after more than 25 years in technology, I still have to use Google to look up answers sometimes. And when I was a software developer and coding, I would spend hours looking for a missing semicolon when my code crashed. And that didn't necessarily mean that I was bad at developing, because I was writing some pretty complex code and building some really amazing platforms. So it was just a simple mistake, or maybe I didn't have the answer and I needed to go learn what I was, looking to do. So, really the best advice is, believe in yourself and know that you deserve to be where you are because you worked hard to get there.
Also, and I think that also is that the answer is always out there. You just also have to find it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, nobody knows everything. So, if you don't know something, it doesn't mean you're not good at your job. It just means that, you need to go out and look for the answer and learn. And I don't think we ever stop learning.
No, I completely agree with that. I love, you are somebody who I would set as a role model for my daughter. So I think that this book and where you're going with it and your outlook on everything is something that any parent would want their daughter or their spouse or even if it's them, maybe they're a minority, but I think it's something that's great for them to read the book, listen to the information, learn the lessons, and take it and leverage from that. And I think that you've done a really well job of that. But I'm also, no, of course, I wouldn't tell you if it wasn't true. If anybody knows me, that's true. But I'm also really excited because I know you've written a couple other books. You have another book coming. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this fall I contributed to a few co-authored Mission Matters books, talking about my experiences in cybersecurity, as well as, really still encouraging girls to look at STEM careers. I'm looking at some new projects to expand some of the ideas in my book, like perhaps the digital divide or something like that. And somebody threw out there the idea of turning some of my stories and such into a book written specifically for children. After spending a good half of a year writing, my days feel a little bit empty now that I'm not writing. So I'm kind of like, hey, I enjoyed the process. So I think I will continue writing and try to get another book out there soon, either for, young adults or adults or the children's book. I'm not 100% what my next project will be, but it's kind of exciting.
No, I'm excited for you, and I love where you're coming from. I can't say that enough. But I have my last question, my final question, which is probably the most important. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you for either your books or maybe some coaching, some speaking, how would they go about doing that?
So probably through LinkedIn, which is just Shannon Wilkinson. I'm also on Twitter at, I believe it's S Wilkinson Cyber, or I can be contacted through my company at info@tegocyber.com, and Tego is TEGO cyber.com. As well as if anybody's interested, I set up an author's page on Amazon. So if anybody would like to know when the next releases come out and everything, they can follow me on Amazon at Shannon Wilkinson.
I love it. Shannon, well, like I said, I'm a mother of a daughter. So, and I come from a male-oriented business also. So I appreciate where you come from. I appreciate what you put out there, because I think that's strong. I think it's powerful. And I do think somebody needs to advocate on that basis. And I think you do well with it. And I think that what you've done is awesome. And I want to congratulate you on becoming a #1 international bestselling author with your new book, Ripping Off The Hoodie.
Thank you, Alicia.
No, it's been a pleasure. So, guys, you just heard from Shannon Wilkinson, #1 international best-selling author for her new book, Ripping Off the Hoodie. Jump on Amazon. The links will be listed below where you can find it yourself and take a look because it's definitely worth the read. All right, guys, until next time, this is your host, Alicia DeBrell from Insight Media. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.